I don't know if I'm ready for this one, but let's go. Hey Spuds, it's Jamie. Welcome back to another video. First one on the channel. I don't know, but welcome either way. I'm very glad to have you here to help me through today's video react of a transphobic video. Oh yes, this one is called Gender Transformation: The Untold Realities. Oh, how dramatic. It came out last year and perhaps a little late on this train, as I often am with these videos, but never mind. I think there's always a time and a space and a place, and it's never too late to call out transphobia and inaccuracies towards the trans community. So that's what we're doing today. I hope you are here with me for the journey. Today we are reacting to the trailer, like the 3-minute long trailer rather than the full-length documentary thing, because I can't find it anywhere for free and I'm not paying for that. So we're just gonna have a little look at the trailer. But the description of this documentary is it will unveil what actually happens to those who started to change their gender, its implications, the financial interests behind the transgender movement, and the political and societal mechanisms in play. It's all very ooh. There's literally an entire YouTube account just for this documentary. It has 1,000 subscribers and there's a couple different videos for it. I think today we are going to be reacting to like the official trailer, as far as I'm aware. I don't know. One of the trailers. They seem to have put out a bunch of trailers. I think reacting to one of them is going to be more than enough. So yes, obviously places like Mumsnet were drooling all over this and being,
oh my god, what an amazing documentary,
because they love anything that can villainize trans people. I've not watched this before, so I don't fully know what it's about, but what I have heard is there's elements of like stories from detransitioners, or that might be quite a big part of it. And I do want to preface this with saying trans people literally don't have a problem with detransitioners, but just because there is the existence of a small minority, as in around 1% of people who transition may regret it, just because there is a small minority of people where transitioning was not the right thing for them and they have a journey on the other side to move past that part of their life, it does not mean that we can then restrict access, take away rights, stop the healthcare of trans people just for that 1%. We don't stop all surgeries because 14% of people regret surgery. Why do we hold a different standard for trans related things? So just prefacing this with, there is no negative feelings towards detransitioners as a whole. There's just a problem when people transition, it's not the right thing for them, and then instead of owning up and being like, that wasn't the right thing for me, and dealing with that themselves and getting the support that they deserve, they twist that into transphobia and they suddenly are like,
oh well, because it wasn't right for me, therefore nobody should access this and I'm going to stop anybody from getting this kind of care.
When in reality they are the 1%, and that isn't fair in my opinion. Detransitioners are a small minority of people who transition, and transphobic detransitioners are a small minority of detransitioners, but they seem to get all the airtime, obviously because they feed very nicely into supporting this transphobic rhetoric and ideology and trying to villainize trans people. So I believe that's a lot of what this documentary is about. Just wanted to start that off with, like, this is not a hate to detransitioners, just a dislike towards anybody who is transphobic, regardless of where they're coming from with that transphobia. Like, let's not be transphobic. Let's watch this trailer. Yay.
Transgender. It's made very, very cool through the media.
I'm already going to stop it right there. Where? Firstly, what's wrong with people exploring how they feel and their expression and their identity and figuring out who they are? I don't see anything wrong with that. Secondly, generally within society, within media, being trans isn't cool. It always comes with a sad backstory. Even if you see like a happy trans character, some shit has gone down in their past that will come up because they're trans. When you see people speaking on TV, being trans is always posed as some kind of debate and something that is bad, and trans people are constantly villainized. Trans people's rights are constantly challenged. It's illegal to be trans in multiple countries, and the violence rate towards trans people is incredibly high, particularly towards trans women and particularly towards trans women of color. So the concept that transphobes want to push this narrative that being trans has suddenly become cool and trendy, and it's like this thing that people are choosing to do because they think it's wonderful and it's easy and it will make them happy, is really barking up the wrong tree.
Through TikTok, through Reddit, through
Tumblr. Bit behind the times.
Through Instagram, through Facebook, through Twitter, through their games, in their movies.
Princess who came to your ball tonight was me.
Why are they all doing this?
It's indoctrination. Oh my god, it's on the television screens.
So essentially what they're having a problem with is representation. It's like trans people have been around forever, and acceptance of trans people through different times and within different societies and cultures has kind of been a bit like up and down. Some places are very accepting more than others. Some periods of time have been more accepting. Some cultures are more accepting. And what we're seeing now kind of in Western society is this recognition that trans people exist, and this increase in representation for trans people, and this increase in like, hey, maybe we should just like not be transphobic and we should be nice to trans people, and trans people should have equal rights and opportunities and appropriate healthcare and all of this stuff, and you know, not be able to get fired for being trans. That would be nice. But with this representation, what we're finding is that people who don't like trans people, and it's coming from a place of fear and ignorance and not liking new things and things that they don't understand, there's this very big loud pushback of like,
Oh, ew, oh my god, trans, get it away from me. Why is it everywhere?
when it's just kind of, there's now the odd trans character coming up in different forms of media and in different places, and there are trans people, hello, talking about their lives on social media. And because in transphobes' minds, being trans can't possibly be an okay thing to be and just another way of being human, the easiest argument to give is like,
Oh, now they're indoctrinating the children. There are more trans people and there's more trans visibility because it's become trendy and cool because of social media and television, and Hollywood is transing the kids.
when like in reality it's just a recognition of the times and making inclusivity and diversity actually inclusive and diverse of all types of people and all ways of being a person, being trans being one of them.
Simultaneously.
Pause that
I
at a
am a
great
former
time.
public school teacher of 15 years. Our public schools have changed. 5 years ago, there was no students that were identifying as non-binary. Gender fluid was not something that we even knew about.
Why the like the dramatic soundtrack over the top of this? Because someone's sitting there, like really what she's saying is 5 years ago very few kids knew that they could be non-binary, so we didn't see them coming out as such. 5 years ago we didn't have certain terms that encapsulated people's identities, but now what we're seeing is people have the language to describe how they feel and who they are from a younger age, so they are figuring that out. What we're also realizing is that people are becoming more comfortable within their peer groups to explore who they are and to learn about themselves and learn what makes them comfortable and learn what makes them who they are as people from a younger age. And I don't see why that's a problem, that people would figure themselves out and have more time in their lives to live as their true selves. I don't get the issue.
If I were to explore with a person about why they believe they're in the wrong body, my license would now be under threat.
I would want to know what the explore why they think this. What does that constitute? Because conversion therapy is not okay. So if you're practicing some kind of reparative conversion therapy on a trans person or somebody who's having feelings around their gender identity, and it's not a, hey, cool, maybe this is something you want to explore and look into and find what makes you comfortable, because at the end of the day, that's not pushing anybody either way. You're just letting them be themselves and do their thing, because there is nothing wrong with being trans, and there's also nothing wrong with exploring your expression, your identity and how you feel, and then realizing that you're not trans. Like, I don't understand why there is this big outcry of people just being themselves. It baffles me. And that phrasing, it's very insidious, because if you don't know and you're watching that, it's somebody going like,
I can't even question. I can't even ask people about their identities and I will get fired. Oh my god.
but in reality, what's highly likely going on is it's like,
I do conversion therapy for trans people and now I'm not allowed to do it anymore. Oh dear.
I told the therapist I think I might be transgender, but I don't really know and I need your help.
we've seen this person before. It was another one of these documentaries that focused all around like,
Being trans has been made a trend and kids are being forced to transition and made to feel like they have to do this and go through surgeries and blah 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 blah.
and they just keep using the same people, and I'm like, mate, like, you deserve support for what you went through. Trans people don't hate you, trans people would support you, but like the right wing and the transphobic people are using detransitioners like this who are in vulnerable positions, and I'm not excusing them. They also have their own ability to not be assholes, but they're absolutely getting suckered in and shown probably love and support from people who are then just like, I'm only doing this because you fit my agenda and I can now like twist your experience to hate on trans people.
He affirmed me immediately.
Immediately, she affirmed me as a transgender woman.
These kids are getting put on puberty blockers like after the first visit, or they're just getting pushed through this pipeline of surgery.
They make it all sound like you walk in to a doctor's office and you walk out with life-changing hormones and a referral for surgery next week. That is not how it works. At most, they're finding some very rare cases of people who maybe got access to things like puberty blockers quicker than average. But like, again, puberty blockers, there's just this big outcry because they're now helping trans kids. They've been used for precocious puberty for decades with no issues. Nobody's had a problem with them. Nobody's been like,
Oh my god, they're dangerous for kids to take.
no one's ever said that until it started to become more widely known that they were helping trans kids and being used in gender affirming care. And now suddenly people have an issue with them. They're reversible. Kids can take puberty blockers and it actually gives them more time to explore who they are and to think about their identity and find out who they are and what makes them comfortable if that's what they need. It literally gives them more time. They do not go through any permanent changes either way. And that's what transphobes hate. They hate kids being given more time to explore who they are and being affirmed in their gender and being allowed to do things that make them comfortable and happy. Transphobes just want kids to be miserable, basically. Well, trans kids to be miserable. But in terms of like surgeries, it's something that is said so much by people with this kind of ideology, saying
children are being pushed to have surgery.
And this is not happening. Under 18s can get plastic surgery that's not related to being trans. Kids get medically necessary surgeries all the time. Gender affirming care is a model of treatment. It is a model of healthcare that actually helps and improves and saves lives. So why should kids be denied that just because it's trans related? On the same point, kids are not having trans related surgeries. It's just not happening. The very, very, very few people who are 16, 17 and accessing things like top surgery, we're talking about minuscule numbers. It's so uncommon. It's so difficult. And even there, even within this whole grand scheme of every age group who is accessing surgery, the regret rate is still incredibly low, and there is not this same outcry at regret rates for other types of medical procedures and medical interventions and medicines and surgeries and things that also kids have and literal children will have, and it will impact their lives. There is not the outcry. If transphobes really cared about kids experiencing irreversible medical things that they didn't consent to or they couldn't consent to, then why are they not talking about surgeries that are performed on intersex children and circumcision? Why is that not being brought into the conversation ever? It's because they don't actually care about the children. They just care about being transphobic. And using kids and women's rights are two really big ways to get the most amount of people on board with the transphobia, because it hits home for a lot of people. It's such like a manipulative argument because it's them saying,
you want to protect your kid, right? You would protect your child. You don't want to put your child in danger. Then why are you supporting this type of healthcare?
And then it's about trans people. And I can see how people who don't know anything about transitioning or being trans or the process or the healthcare related to being trans would hear what some of these transphobic people are saying and be like, oh my god, yeah, I want to protect my kid. What do I do to protect my kid? Because that's natural, right? And it's just so misinformed. It's so manipulative. It's so harmful to the trans community because what they are saying is not what's actually happening, and what they are saying does actually happen outside of trans healthcare to people and to children, and they don't have anything to say about that, and they don't care. And I think that double standard is one of the biggest indicators that it's all just a pile of bullshit, and it's all just because they don't like trans people.
And then I felt down, I felt tired, I felt exhausted,
This visualization is actually horrific. This is some of the worst shit. It might not seem on the face of it that bad, but they're literally showing somebody who looks very, very young, looking scared and seeming to be almost forcibly put in a position of having surgery and being put under anesthetic, as if trans people, particularly young trans people, have no say in what they go through. And that is just so far from the truth. Trans people, particularly trans youth, literally have to fight to gain any kind of access to healthcare in a majority of places around the world. The UK has just banned the use of puberty blockers for trans kids only, not cis kids. Perfectly safe to take if you're cis, but not safe to take if you're trans? Doesn't make sense. And in the US, there are so many bills trying to prevent and restrict the access and provisions of gender affirming care. And that's just in 2 countries. It's actually disgusting the way they are portraying this and just the level level of inaccuracies in it. Horrendous. This is so uncomfortable to watch because it is so wrong.
My mom said I looked like a pale ghost.
I started to become dysfunctional in just about every area of my life.
And this is all said without any context. There's no context about what these people are actually talking about. There's just this kind of subliminal, like,
This is all to do with trans things. This is all to do with them being forcibly told and made to believe that they were trans and then being forced to have surgeries and take hormones. That is what's caused all of this.
and there's no discussion of, like, you know, free will and decisions and wrong decisions being made and people not doing the right things for themselves and people maybe not telling the truth to doctors, maybe coming across a bad actor of a doctor, because that happens in every area of medicine. Why are we blaming the trans people for the wrong decisions, the bad moves, the bad practices of other people, both in terms of some detransitioners and also medical professionals? We should be working to improve access to healthcare and improve the quality of the healthcare given to trans people, not remove it just because 1% regret it.
Come to find out I had 2 weeks to live.
And that sounds horrendous, but what's the context of that?
My daughter was in pain. She used to cry. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't concentrate after, taking these hormones.
And that's insinuating that taking hormones would impair your mental function in some major way, which is not a side effect of taking something like testosterone or estrogen. Like, the inaccuracies in 1 minute and 29 seconds are so baffling, and it's all being said without any kind of context. I mean, obviously, I'm sure that more is said in the full film, but the fact that this was the trailer and this is the accessible part of what they've made in the documentary is really scary, that this is the kind of stuff that is being put out there, because I can absolutely see how somebody who doesn't know anything would watch this and be horrified and be uncomfortable because of what these people are saying. But there's no truth and context given, and it's a very separate issue to trans people. Trans people deserve access to healthcare, deserve to be believed, deserve to be supported. Detransitioners deserve access to support and appropriate healthcare as well. But we cannot lump the two together and say,
because this portion of people regretted it, then this 99% of people are no longer allowed to access this type of medicine.
Because, if we did that for everything, nobody would ever receive any kind of medical care, medications, surgeries, nothing. Because 1% is actually a really low rate within medicine to find in terms of regrets and people not having a good experience taking a certain type of medication.
Doctors won't speak out. Very few of us will speak out. If you belong to a very large medical organization, they will threaten your job.
Where is this happening? Where is the proof of this? I've seen plenty of medical professionals, plenty of academics have absolutely no fear of speaking out. What I have seen is people anonymously supporting because they fear showing support will mean they are ostracized within their peer group. I literally saw this whilst I did my PhD. I was part of a network of academics that were on like this email server thing talking about research. A transphobic documentary came out and they were all praising it. Like, I knew there was a shit ton of transphobia, but when I saw that I was shocked and I called it out. I called out what was wrong with this documentary and the issues and why what they were saying just wasn't right. And I got massively berated in front of everybody else. I got called an idiot and stupid and ridiculous. Like, how dare I say these things, when all I did was provide like a rational, actually based in scientific fact response to the transphobia they were spewing. The only support I got was done privately, and it was literally people emailing me just individually, not on the server, saying thank you for saying something. I would too, but I can't, in fear of my reputation and my job and my position within the academic field. So,
as one doctor gushed about how much the procedures bring in.
It's a $1.5 billion industry.
people are barely getting access to it. This is the kind of thing that is not covered under insurance. Trans people, LGBT plus people as a whole, notoriously are less affluent than cis straight people. This is a very Americanized perspective on it. So we're seeing the same kind of messaging and the same kind of pushback in the UK, aside from this financial thing, because in the UK we have have the National Health Service and it's not privatized. So you can go private to get surgeries and hormones, but it's also available on the NHS. But we're seeing the same patterns in the UK and the US in terms of people transitioning and trans people coming out and wanting to access healthcare, same kind of pushback. But the difference is this argument of like money. This is literally just like American transphobes thinking that America is the whole world and the way America works is how the whole world works, when that is not the case. I'd also love it if just for once transphobes could give some sources on all of the things that they put out, because there's so many just like bits of stuff being said and no way to find out if it's true. I wanted to fact check the $1.5 billion industry and also just put it into some perspective. So yes, the US has a private medical care system, which means that it's profit based, which means any kind of medical care that is needed, somebody's gonna profit off of it. Like the cost of medications out there are ridiculous compared to how much they cost to produce, because people want money. A quick Google shows that sex reassignment surgery market size is valued at $700 million. So that's less than half what they're saying. And that was for 2023. And this film came out early 2024. So I'm assuming it was probably filmed in and around 2023. So I doubt that they would have updated figures based on that. So $700 million industry with a 1% regret rate. If we then go to plastic surgery, that is valued at $67.3 billion in 2021. And that was predicted to grow about 11% over the course of 10 years and be around 200 billion by the time we hit 2031. But currently 67 billion, 67.3 billion, so 66.4 billion bigger than trans surgery. But a UK poll showed that around 60% of people regretted their cosmetic surgery. And this is not me sitting here going that people shouldn't have cosmetic surgery. I'm just saying, like, you're talking from the perspective of a country who has a profit-based medical system, which is just awful as a concept, in my opinion. Trans people exist. Trans people are about 1% of the population, which means that there are still quite a hefty number of trans people in the US because there's a big population. So the population of the US is 333 million. An estimated 1% of people are trans, so that would put the trans population in the US at 3.3 million. So that's still millions of people, right? So profit-based medical system, millions of people wanting to access that care, 1% regret rate. And you're saying it's a bad thing that that industry is now saying that they're making money. It's because there's trans people out there who, when they live in a country where you have to pay for your healthcare and the doctors want to profit, there's going to be some kind of profit and money in it. There's going to be some kind of industry and financial gain for some people out there. And I'm not saying everybody's acting as good actors, as bad actors in every field of medicine, but that's not an argument to stop people transitioning. Like, why are you not using this energy to say, hey, let's maybe not have a privatized, profit-driven healthcare system? And if we really care about people regretting making permanent changes to their body and permanent medical decisions, why are we only looking at trans people? It's because they don't care.
For surgery alone.
It's a political agenda being worked out. Kids are sort of a test subject.
Kids are a test subject for what? For what? Oh my God.
If you're going to look for anything in this country, you're going to follow the money, because it will always tell you the truth.
Honestly, the level of drama in that 2-minute trailer, wow. Okay, I'm glad it's done. Let's digest that for a second. Essentially, what this all boils down to is transphobia being attempted to be hidden behind various other things. And it does start to get muddled when you look at all the transphobic arguments and you kind of pull it together and you see it out in front of you, because there's actually no solid reason, and they're clutching at straws and they're clutching on fake statistics and imaginary things that they've just decided to say and manipulative language. When you delve deeper into it, there's not any basis to these types of videos and to these arguments other than transphobia, other than a discomfort towards trans people. I'm not saying that everybody needs to fight every battle, but you never see any of the people who are transphobic in the name of protecting kids actually doing any of the things that would protect kids. Like, they don't want to do anything to do with like gun control. They don't want to do anything to do with circumcision and surgeries on intersex kids, nothing to do with like a financial aid for children and just helping kids generally. There is no energy put into actually doing things that would support vulnerable kids, or kids in a difficult situation, or kids actually going through a hard time, or kids actually being forced into medical procedures that they don't want and don't need and shouldn't be having. But all the energy is being put into trans kids and trans people, and suddenly that's the big bad evil in the world. Really what we're seeing is an increase in representation, because we're recognizing that trans people exist and trans people are just normal regular people, hello, and trans people deserve representation and rights within society. And when we increase representation of something and acceptance of something, we see more people realizing that that's who they are. And doesn't make them that, it helps them realize that that is who they are and who they always have been, and then feeling more comfortable to come out and live as their true selves because they're seeing more acceptance from those around them. That's why we're seeing an increase in the number of trans people. We saw the same thing with left-handedness. When that stopped being so stigmatized, there was an increase in the number of people who were finally just able to be left-handed, because if you go back several decades, it was really stigmatized to be left-handed. I'm not saying being trans and being left-handed are the same thing, as somebody recently liked to comment, and they're using that increase in people coming out and figuring out who they are earlier and weaponizing it and saying that they're being indoctrinated and they're being forced, and they're using very inflammatory language and imagery to make people scared and make people worried, like
this could happen to your kid, oh my god.
When in reality, allowing people to just be themselves, whether that's to do with sexual orientation or gender identity or just their expression and who they want to be and like what job they want to have and like what they want to study and just all these things, as long as they're not hurting anybody else, which being trans doesn't hurt anybody, then why are we not just embracing that? I don't see why it's such a bad, big, scary thing unless you're transphobic and you don't want to learn about trans people. Don't understand why it's so big and scary that trans people exist and that trans kids exist. And I think a vast majority, if not all, trans adults will tell you they wish they were able to transition as kids, because if you have a trans adult, that was someone who was a trans kid but they maybe just didn't know it yet. My only regret over my transition is that I didn't do it earlier. So yes, sympathy for detransitioners, not when they turn out to be transphobic assholes and they try and prevent access to healthcare for trans people just because they were in the 1% who regretted it. Get your support, you deserve that, but do not weaponize your experience against the trans community and be transphobic and pander to transphobes. The trans community does not deserve for you to give them that false ammunition. But yeah, overall that was quite horrendous and I have no interest in watching the full film. It just all causes damage and the trans community does not deserve this kind of treatment. The transphobes just rely on pure lies and that is it. So yeah, if you like this video, think about giving it a thumbs up and subscribing if you want to, but no pressure. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Much love. Bye.